So now we're going to shift gears to a topic that I cover quite closely at Devex, which is efforts to connect the unconnected. And there have really been all kinds of initiatives to boost affordable connectivity since the COVID-19 pandemic struck. These efforts have been ongoing, but I've really seen a surge of urgency and activity as so many essential services and conversations like this one move online. So in this conversation, we're going to connect these efforts to connect the unconnected to this topic of innovative finance. And one of the exciting things about this session, as you can see in the session title, Microsoft's Airband 1 year on lessons learned, we talked about this initiative. We actually had some news about this initiative at this event last year in London. And so we're going to hear how it's going and what more is needed in this space. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Shelley McKinley is Vice President of Microsoft's Technology and Corporate Responsibility Group. And Bryan Kariuki is the Managing Director for Investment and Partnerships at Mawingu Networks, which you'll hear a little bit more about. So to kick things off, Shelley, those of us attendees who were with us at our Future of Development Finance event a year ago may be familiar with Airband, certainly are familiar with Airband, but can you tell us a little bit more about the effort and how it fits within a larger strategy at Microsoft to spread internet access? Because I know it's not just technical solutions, but working, for example, with development finance institutions as part of your strategy.
Sure, and thanks. It's really my pleasure to be here again at Devex, even if virtually. So hi, everyone. I won't say good morning, even though it's morning where I am. I know people are around the world watching this. So I guess good day to everyone. It was my really distinct pleasure to be able to come to Devex last year and announce our Airband initiative, our global ambition to cover 40 million underserved and unconnected people around the world by 2022. And so Airband is a larger initiative at Microsoft. We cover rural US, we cover urban US, we cover global connectivity. And so really the program itself is working with partners around the world to help them accelerate their efforts to cover unconnected people. Partners like Bryan, who's on the call from Mawingu Networks in Kenya, partners all across really the United States and across the world. So we help with technology, we help with financing, we help with connecting, we help with technology that can digitally transform communities and digitally transform the way people live their daily lives. You know, think about the opportunities you have once you get connectivity somewhere. To be able to do things like, I think the woman in the last session was talking about monitoring and managing vaccines as they travel across a country. Now you can do that at one endpoint and another endpoint, but imagine what connectivity can do to help you monitor and manage things along the way. So without connectivity, we don't have really access to what are 21st century technology pieces that really help us advance. Couple of other things that I do at Microsoft, this really underlies them. It's the foundation for the work that we do on sustainability. It's the foundation for the work that we do on helping people with disabilities work, live, and play like everyone else. It's really provides the basis of what is fundamentally Microsoft's mission. People ask me often, why is Microsoft interested in connecting people? Aren't you just a software company? And the answer to that is really, our mission is to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And to do that, people need to be connected.
Yeah, it was interesting revisiting the conversation this time last year in London, because you and Raj Kumar from Devex were talking about why internet access is so critical and what would our life be like if our access was taken away. Flash forward to this year when the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly reinforced the need for internet access and this message that people who are disconnected will fall further and further behind. That's been very clear in recent months. So with that, I want to ask, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected this effort that you announced on stage last year, connecting 40 million people by 2022? In some ways, has the pandemic accelerated that effort, or what's really the impact been?
So we'd be making the world's biggest understatement if I said that we are not in a fundamentally different place than we were last year this time. We all know it, we all see it, we all live it every single day. So much has changed around the world. There is one important thing that we're talking about today that frankly has not changed that much around the world, and that is the speed at which we are covering the world. So if you look at the latest statistics, what you see is, I think I said last year on stage that we had just about half of the world online. The UN announced the ITU's data just a couple of weeks ago, saying it's 53.6% of the people who have some access to connectivity. That is not nearly fast enough. So that is not changing. So I think about it as the virtual connection of people is not increasing as quickly as the physical connection of people is decreasing in these times. So that is a real challenge. What is done, exactly as you've said, is it has shown a spotlight on what happens when we have this situation. You know, every day you see kids can't do their homework, people can't access telehealth. Mental health issues in the crisis certainly are just exploding. And if people don't have access to internet, then they of course can't access their telehealth providers. So it's a big challenge. It's disproportionately impacted people who are already disproportionately impacted by internet. So you think about women, think about communities of color, you think about people with disabilities, those things. So that's a real challenge. That said, I'm really happy that we've made some significant progress towards our goal of 40 million people. So we're right now at about, we'll call it close to 17 million people that we, with our partners, have been able to help cover with internet access. And I do want to say that this is not something that Microsoft, goes out and rolls out networks by ourselves. We are very dependent on our fantastic partners to actually do this work. So it is something that we spend a lot of emphasis and time on, and given us, as I said, it's really core to our mission, but fundamentally the execution of this really is dependent on the amazing partnerships that we've been able to form with people like Mawingu Networks.
Well, that's the perfect way to transition to Bryan here. So Bryan, I'd love for you to describe what Mawingu Networks does. And quickly though, I'd love to just share an analogy because for those who are less familiar with the internet access space, years ago, I did an interview with the chairman of Mawingu Networks actually, and he provided this analogy that I thought was really useful. So I'd love to just share it in case it's useful for our attendees, and then get your reaction here a little bit more about what you do. So he described how internet access efforts are really look like this, right? The internet is like a highway and road system, and fiber, which we have big tech companies working on fiber initiatives across Africa. Fiber serves as a sort of superhighway at the country level. And there are investment opportunities for small businesses to set up filling stations that connect roads to one another. So do you think that's a useful analogy? And if so, can you also help us understand how Mawingu Networks fits into this analogy in this system?
Thanks, Catherine. That is an absolutely useful analogy. The situation in Africa is that 60% of people live within 25 kilometers of a fiber line. That makes them very accessible for people such as ourselves who are willing and able to extend fiber connectivity through uses of various technologies, wireless technologies, including TV white spaces, which we have worked with Microsoft to develop use cases for. The problem is that because of the dispersed nature of population, so for instance, in Kenya, 70% of the population is rural. Because of the dispersed nature of populations, it's very expensive for typical infrastructure providers to extend that last mile. So what Mawingu does is we make use of innovative business model and technology model, well, really innovations to reach these people sustainably. I'm sitting here in Nanyuki, which is a town 3 hours north of Nairobi, with a population of 80,000. And this is one of the largest population centers we serve. We operate across 10 counties today in Kenya, with a population under cover of 9 million. And here we serve people for as little as 10 US cents a month. And for as little as that, they get access to life-changing connectivity. Our customers include individuals, such as a woman in Nanyuki, who, this is a real customer who has a disabled child who was unable to do her secondary schooling from school and used one of our public Wi-Fi hotspots to study from home. And today she's studying medicine from one of the local universities. Our customers include businesses, such as a digital center in Narumoru town, not too far from here, which provides access to online resources such as e-government services for 300 people in its community. And our customers also include homes, such as the rural livestock farmer in Isiolo, who lives in a mud house, which he built himself, with no TV, no running water, not even electricity. So he has to use solar for his connectivity. But he was so progressive that not only did he get an internet connection, he proudly proclaimed that he would even let his wife make use of the internet connection. So since we started in 2012, we've been refining our business and technology model, which allows us to sustainably provide connectivity in these areas. And Microsoft has been an incredible support through this journey.
So, Bryan, you mentioned technology innovations and business model innovations, and I want to get a sense of both. So first, sticking with technology, and then we'll talk business model innovations. How exactly, I mean, not to get too nitty gritty into the details, but for those who are less familiar with the internet access space, how does this work technically speaking? For example, I know TV white space is part of the technology approach. So can you talk about technology innovations and what does that look like in terms of infrastructure and work on the ground? Then we'll get to the models.
Sure. Well, we mainly make use of wireless technologies to extend the last mile. As I said, most people in Africa are accessible for fiber connections with the use of the right wireless technologies. TV white spaces is a big one. So what you need technologies that enable you to reach people in cost-effective ways, because a lot of these people are in places that are not densely populated. So I'll give you an example. What we do is we find a fiber line, we essentially plant a mast on top of the fiber line, and then we transmit the signal wirelessly. We work with the backhaul fiber providers to get fantastic rates for fiber breakouts as part of the partnerships that we have, because we do it at scale. And then when we plant a mast, a typical mast for a mobile network operator will cost $200,000 to $300,000. One of our masts, which we have innovated on, costs us $10,000 to $15,000. And with that $10,000 to $15,000 mast, we're able to reach people with direct line of sight within 25 kilometers, and we can bounce the signal off several times, 3 to 5 times, so that we can reach people over 100 kilometers away from our fiber line using our technology. The radios that we use are also quite innovative. So I've mentioned TV white spaces, which is essentially the use of unused spectrum that was traditionally used for transmission of terrestrial TV signals. That happens to be quite useful for transmission of internet signals with the right technologies. Now, that equipment and those technologies have been quite expensive in the past, and Microsoft has been incredibly helpful in helping to drive the development of use cases. You need lots and lots of people to use the technology so that it can become cheaper and cheaper to produce and cheaper to deploy. And that's what's been happening. So that's just an idea of the kind of technology innovations that we have rolled out in order to reach the places that we do reach.
Great, thanks, Bryan.
And then, can I jump in there?
Please.
Yeah, I just want to underscore how important that point is that Bryan made in the use of creative and alternative technologies to cover people quickly, because something like TV white spaces, as he explained, is like terrestrial television, the same piece of the spectrum. And so just like your television goes really far, but your little hotspot in your house doesn't go very far, that's because of the way the wave works. And so when you think about the vast areas that need to be covered, if we all rely on fiber, we're never going to get there. And so the investment and the utilization of wireless technologies is fundamentally critical to how we start covering people in the rapid way that we need to. And I think when we started looking at our US program a few years ago, all the learnings that we had from markets like Kenya, we could take those and think, how do we cover the rural US? It was something that, maybe we hadn't focused on, and we've taken so many great learnings from what has happened globally and brought them to the US to start working on connectivity. But it just tells you kind of how much you can learn if you're working creatively in different areas and bringing that together and then scaling it to deploy in other areas. It's just been fantastic in terms of what we can think about, how we can accomplish things much more quickly than this, this hyper focus on fiber. Fiber is important, there's no doubt, but we can't get over focused on fiber to cover people quickly and economically.
Absolutely. Totally agree on this need for, as you put it, creative and alternative technologies. Now, when it comes to how to finance these technologies, one of the challenges is, the world of financing perhaps not keeping pace with the world of technological innovation in the internet access space. At least that's something that I've seen. One of the points that came up actually in the Future of Development Finance last year was that the banking world, including development finance institutions, already knows how to finance large telcos, for example. But there are these new business models, Mawingu networks among them, that are ready for new types of financing and need new types of financing, and financing is the barrier. So let's connect this conversation to the future of development finance. Where are we right now when it comes to financing these creative and alternative technologies for internet access? Where are we now? What more is needed, and how can development finance institutions play a role? And either of you can jump in on that.
Sure, I'll jump in, and I'm sure Bryan has a big perspective on this as well, as being one of the people that really uses a lot of this. But what I'll say is what we've seen, at least in the last year since I was here a year ago, is there are efforts to do some more creative financing. A couple of things that we've done has been, we have a partnership with the USAID, who gave $5 million in funding from the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative to work with partners in rural areas in Colombia, Ghana, Guatemala, India, Kenya, certainly with Mawingu networks. And that has also that focus that I think is so important, which is on women, on bridging the gender digital divide. We've also signed an MOU with DFC to work together on projects. So when you think about, we have the expertise with our partners to do these innovative, creative things. And so the partnerships that we've been able, these public-private partnerships, have really, I think, enabled us to expand the possible in terms of development financing. And I think Bryan's probably got loads of ideas on what could be done in the financing area, but we do need to ensure that people are thinking more flexibly and more creatively in this space. So, Bryan, sure. I bet you've got a lot to say on this one.
Absolutely, Shelley.
Can I ask you a quick question, Bryan? Can you also just expand on Mawingu networks and sort of how your financing has worked, how you've raised money in the past? And then we'll get to this larger question around what more is needed for the space. But I want to hear what this looks like for Mawingu networks in terms of the challenge of financing, and then broaden out to your larger points on the sector as a whole, if that makes sense.
Sure. So Mawingu has been incredibly fortunate, and that is mainly as a result of our affiliation with Microsoft as part of this, and running back from before the Airband initiative for rural broadband connectivity was established, and because Microsoft took a risk on us. It's been easier for us to get financing, venture type financing from angel investors. We recently raised a round of financing from institutional investors, but we also have, we've also received a round of a facility from the International Development Finance Corporation from the US. But the reason all of this has happened, if I'm to be honest, is because of the bet that Microsoft took on us. If we weren't affiliated to Microsoft, we would be, just another Kenyan internet service provider in rural areas. Not many people would have heard of us. It would have been very difficult for us to convince these financiers of the viability of the model. They wouldn't have taken a second look. So yes, we have been fortunate, but the reason we've been fortunate is because of what Microsoft how Microsoft has worked with us. And then to your earlier point around sort of how development financing, opportunities for development financing, I think what I'd like to point out is the opportunity presented recently by the COVID crisis. And we've seen two types of reactions from financiers during COVID. And what distinguishes the two is either a failure or the ability to recognize or respond to the understanding that COVID is a perishable opportunity for acceleration of plans for universal connectivity, right? The opportunity will expire. It's not going to be around forever. And the two approaches we've seen are, on the one hand, there are those who have adapted their traditional processes to accommodate the challenges and opportunities of the time, and have made financing available for the sort of projects that we can carry out now to accelerate the actualization of plans for universal connectivity, which then enables us to move fast to meet the challenge now. And on the other side, we've seen a lot of financiers declaring commitment to COVID efforts, but being unable or unwilling to change how they typically work, right? Which means that by the time their financing or the results of their financing comes to bear, it will be too late. So, this COVID has been a fantastic opportunity for financiers to really get with the program. Not everyone has responded the best way, and it has really shown that the problems that a lot of these financing institutions are set up to solve are those that are around for some time, are those that are going to be around for a long time. But we now have an opportunity to accelerate plans for connectivity, as Shelley said earlier, and people really need to take advantage of this opportunity, or else lose it completely.
Such a powerful point. Yeah, go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I love how Bryan said they would be nowhere without Microsoft. The truth is also that Microsoft would be nowhere in covering people in Kenya if it was not for partners like Mawingu Networks, because they are on the ground every single day working with customers and getting people connected. It's just such an important piece of the equation.
It was really interesting for me to hear sort of what that endorsement has meant for Mawingu Networks. And quick question for you, Shelley. I mean, for organizations that hear about that with Mawingu Networks, and maybe they're in that position of just being another ISP working to connect the unconnected. I mean, what is Microsoft looking for in terms of partners for Airband and other initiatives? Quickly, because we only have a minute left.
Sure. We look to a number of things. We look for people who are connected or on the ground, who understand the needs of the community that they're trying to connect. That is the number one thing. So the great way to contact us is through our website, the Airband Initiative, but fundamentally some expertise in technology, certainly, and working on doing this, and a commitment to it, and a commitment to covering people quickly and affordably, and understanding the needs of the community.
And Shelley, I'll ask you one more question to close, which is, a year ago, you announced these plans to connect 40 million people by 2022. Here we are. A year from now, I look forward to hearing what progress you've made. But over the course of the next year, what's one call to action when it comes to what Bryan mentioned is this perishable opportunity for accelerating plans for universal connectivity? There's a role for innovative finance to play. So what's your call to action in terms of the role innovative finance can play to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity in the next year?
Yep. I think we all know that we cannot continue to do things like we've always done them and expect a different result. So we need to act flexibly, we need to act quickly, but we also need to act in a way that is inclusive. We have an amazing opportunity right now as people are focused on this to accelerate it. So flexible financial models. You guys are the experts on that are out in the audience. You know how to do that. We know what the pain is that we suffer. So we've got to get together and figure out what are those things that need to be done. So, I would just say everyone needs to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more flexible, and act with significant urgency and inclusion.
Thank you both so much for your time on this session. Looking forward to following your progress in this work.